Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a real head-scratcher happening inside a global nonprofit called Youth with a Mission, or YWAM for short. They've built this incredible, unique university system all across Mexico, but they've hit a wall. There's a problem that they just can't seem to solve. So here's the deal. YWAM's educational side is called the University of the Nations. Now, in Mexico alone, they've got 25 campuses, tons of space, with a capacity for thousands of students. And yet, the growth they should be seeing just isn't there. The numbers have stalled. So, what's the data actually telling us? You can really see the problem when you look at the enrollment for their main foundational program. Now, you see that spike there in 2021? That was a bit of an anomaly. Turns out Mexico was one of the few countries open during the pandemic, so they got a flood of students. But if you take that 1 year out of the equation, the trend is pretty stark. The numbers are flat, or even worse, they're actually going down. So you've got to ask, what is really going on here? To get to the bottom of it, a deep dive investigation was launched, interviewing everybody, students, staff, even local church leaders. And what they found? Well, it points to this massive disconnect between the university and the very people it's trying to serve. The first big clue popped up when they asked students a super simple question about the University of the Nations, or the UofN, and the answers they got back, let's just say they were pretty eye-opening. Okay, get ready for this. A staggering 70% of the students they talked to had never even heard of the University of the Nations before they showed up. Just let that sink in for a second. The vast majority of people attending the university didn't even know it was a university. And the confusion doesn't just stop there. It's not just before they arrive. Even after they had finished a whole course, nearly half the students still felt unsure or not confident in explaining what the UofN even is. We're talking about a huge communication breakdown. Now, this kind of communication gap, it has very real, very human consequences. Researchers heard this kind of sentiment from local pastors, and you can just feel the frustration. They're saying, look, we pour years into our young people, and then they go off to one of these programs and they just don't come back to their home communities. And then you have another massive hurdle, accreditation. When they asked people if the UofN's lack of official government recognition in Mexico is a problem, only a tiny 3% said no. So basically, almost everyone agrees that this is a major roadblock that really limits what a student can do with their education later on. Okay, so with all these problems laid out, you're probably wondering how they can even begin to fix this. But before we can get to the solutions, we have to understand what the University of the Nations is actually trying to be. Because it's not your typical university. Its whole philosophy is built on a very different kind of mission. At its core, the university's philosophy is built on two big complementary ideas from the Bible. Think of it this way. One is like a snapshot, an immediate, urgent call to share a message with every single person. But then there's the other part, which is more like a rolling video, a slow, long-term, generational mission to actually disciple and transform entire nations. So that's a huge goal, right? Transforming a whole nation? I mean, how do you even start? Well, their answer is this concept they call the 7 spheres of society. The core idea is that if you really want to change a culture for the better, you have to train people to be positive influences in these key areas. We're talking government, media, education, the arts, business, the whole shebang. And this all boils down to a totally different definition of success. The goal isn't just about your personal career or your own achievements. It's about being fruitful, and what that means is using your skills, your education, to actively contribute to the good of the entire community around you. All right, so now we get it. We see this big, ambitious vision they have. The question is, how do you connect that vision to the very real, on-the-ground problems we saw earlier, the confusion, the lack of growth? Well, the research lays out a really clear blueprint for the future. It's a really practical 4-point strategy. First up, the big one, accreditation. Go after that official government recognition to give the degrees real-world credibility. Second, communication. Let's fix the messaging so everyone, students, pastors, parents, is on the same page. Third, create clear, structured degree tracks so a student's education feels like it's actually going somewhere. And finally, and this one's a huge shift, intentionally prepare students for life and careers outside the organization to go into those 7 spheres. And what this all really signals is a fundamental shift in mindset. It seems that, without even meaning to, the campuses were sort of geared towards keeping their best students in-house to become staff. But the proposed new goal?
It's to flip that completely on its head, to make the main priority sending fruitful people out into the world to make a real impact on society, to fulfill that original mission.
So at the end of the day, this deep dive into one university in Mexico blows up into a much bigger, more universal question. How does any global organization, any mission, adapt its big model so that it can actually thrive in a specific local context? It's a tough balancing act, right? Juggling that big picture vision with the very real needs of the communities you're there to serve. It's a challenge that countless organizations are facing all over the world today. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.